The twin suns of Lithara stretched low over the horizon, casting long, shimmering shadows across the crystal towers that floated lazily above the city. Aricel perched on the grand observation balcony, her long, silver hair catching the golden light, her violet eyes scanning the throngs below. Her ears, longer and more expressive than any human's, twitched with impatience. Suitors had gathered from dozens of star systems, each convinced that wealth, charm, or bravado would win her favor. They were wrong. She had grown tired of polished words that hid cowardice, of smiles that concealed minds too dull to interest her. Today, she would set a challenge, one so bold that it would filter the timid from the brave, the foolish from the clever. A murmur rose from the crowd as she stepped forward, her presence commanding yet playful. "I will marry only the one who dares to face my trials," she declared, her voice a melodious ripple that carried easily over the plaza. "Courage, wit, and originality will be tested. Fail, and your ambition is forfeit. Succeed, and perhaps you may win my hand." She arched an eyebrow, and one of her ears flicked back, as if mocking the very idea of false suitors. The crowd stiffened, the air thick with anticipation. Princes flexed their muscles, mercenary warriors tightened their gauntlets, and distant dignitaries whispered strategies to each other in languages that twisted like spirals. The first trial began with a simple test. The suitors had to cross the courtyard without triggering a series of floating security drones, each shaped like a mischievous animal. Some drones resembled floating kittens, others like squawking miniature dragons, all equipped with harmless but embarrassingly messy defenses. The courtyard became a chaotic dance. One dignitary tripped over a levitating banana-shaped drone, spinning into a fountain that shot glittering liquid into the air. A prince attempted to vault gracefully over a hovering cube, only to end up caught in a net that promptly hoisted him upside down for public amusement. Aricel's laughter, musical and teasing, rippled across the plaza, ears quivering in delight. "They think bravery is strength," she murmured to herself, a smirk curling her lips. "But foolishness is not courage." Some tried to charm their way through, bowing excessively to the drones as if flattery could deactivate their sensors. One dignitary actually knelt to apologize to a holographic cat, only for it to hiss and vaporize in a puff of sparkling smoke. Others attempted brute force, swinging weapons or shields, and were promptly pelted with harmless paint pellets that left them streaked in neon colors. The crowd roared at each failure, the plaza transformed into a carnival of ridiculous ambition. Even Aricel felt a twinge of amusement at the absurdity, her mind dancing with the possibilities of who might endure the next trials. Amid the chaos, a figure detached himself from the back of the crowd. Kale, the human warrior, stepped forward, unassuming in battered armor that looked scavenged from multiple worlds. His boots scuffed the polished floor as he approached, his posture neither grand nor confident, yet steady. The chatter of the audience faltered, replaced by murmurs of confusion. He raised his eyes to Aricel, and with a voice that carried both determination and awkward charm said, "I accept your challenge." A ripple of laughter ran through the plaza, not out of mockery, but disbelief. Only a human, they whispered, would dare to stand among such alien magnificence and say that. Aricel tilted her head, studying him, her long ears flicking like radar dishes picking up frequencies she hadn't expected. Something about him was different. He didn't boast. He didn't attempt to charm. There was no calculated bravado, only a raw honesty that she hadn't seen in decades of courtly visitors. Her lips curved into a small, private smile. Perhaps, she thought, this one would be worth her time. The next trials were designed not merely to test physical prowess, but cleverness and character. Kale was led through a hall where gravity shifted randomly, forcing him to run on walls, ceilings, and sideways. A series of holographic beasts sprang to life, programmed to scare off the faint-hearted, yet Kale navigated them with a mixture of clumsiness and ingenuity, sometimes sliding across a wall only to crash spectacularly into a floating chandelier, but always rising again, brushing dust from his armor with a grin. "I swear these things have a personal vendetta," he muttered, earning a soft snort of amusement from Aricel as she observed from her balcony. Even the palace servants seemed entertained by his misadventures. One drone attempted to trip him with a floating rope, only for Kale to use it as a makeshift lasso, accidentally tying the drone to a nearby lamp. "Guess I'm redecorating," he joked, grinning as sparks flew. Aricel laughed aloud, the sound ringing across the hall, long ears quivering. Her challenge, once a formality, had become genuine curiosity. Could this awkward, clever human possibly endure the trials that had reduced the best and brightest of her world to pratfalls and humiliation? As the sun dipped below the twin horizon, the crowd began to thin, exhausted by spectacle and laughter alike. Kale remained, standing amidst the scattered remnants of drones, paint, and laughter. Aricel descended to the balcony, her long ears swaying in rhythm with her amused curiosity. "You are unexpected," she said, her voice tinged with amusement and intrigue. "Few dare to step forward, and even fewer endure the first trial without embarrassing themselves completely. You survived with humor if not grace." Kale shrugged, brushing off neon paint streaks, and offered a crooked smile. "I aim to entertain, if nothing else." The palace echoed with the fading light of the twin suns, laughter mingling with the soft hum of hovering drones. Aricel felt a spark of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The first trial was over, yet the adventure had only just begun. The human warrior had stepped forward where others faltered, and for the first time she considered the possibility that perhaps someone, an outsider, unpolished, daring, might truly earn her respect and perhaps her heart. Kale stood at the entrance to the labyrinth, a twisting network of walls that seemed to ripple and flow like liquid metal. The corridors shimmered with soft light, reflecting not only his image, but also the countless improbable versions of himself, each one performing a slightly different, increasingly ridiculous action. He scratched his head beneath the dented helmet, muttering, "Well, I didn't know self-reflection would be so flexible." The moment he stepped forward, the walls began to shift. Corridors stretched, collapsed, and twisted back upon themselves, forcing him to slide sideways, leap awkwardly, and occasionally bump into versions of himself projected from other moments in the maze. One copy waved cheerfully, and Kale waved back, only to step on a moving platform that flung him into the air, where he landed with an ungainly flop, scattering holographic roses. From her observation pod, Aricel leaned forward, ears twitching. The sight of a human navigating a labyrinth designed to confuse the best Litharan minds was more entertaining than she had anticipated. "He's clumsy, but he adapts," she murmured. "There's a certain charm in that." She activated a small holographic display, and a group of robotic tricksters appeared, each designed to distract and confuse with absurd tasks. One rolled forward as a miniature carousel, spinning wildly and emitting the sound of a trombone every time it bumped into a wall. Another hovered like a feathered serpent, constantly reciting Shakespearean insults in a tongue no human could comprehend, yet somehow intelligible to Kale thanks to a small translation chip embedded in his collar. Kale approached the carousel robot with caution, muttering, "Why does it sound like my uncle after 3 spaceport cocktails?" He ducked under a swinging arm, only to be knocked sideways by the serpentine robot, landing in a puddle of levitating paint that clung to him in neon streaks. He looked at the paint, then at the robots, and shrugged. "Well, at least I matched the Daker." Every misstep was punctuated by a burst of humor, Kale's own commentary, the robot's antics, and the subtle amusement of the princess. He began to notice patterns. The way the labyrinth walls shifted, how the robots repeated sequences, and when to move versus when to pause. His clumsy adaptability started to pay off, and the maze became less a trap and more a strange, interactive puzzle he could playfully navigate. The next challenge required him to retrieve a floating gem from a chamber dominated by a holographic cat as large as a palace hall. The cat demanded compliments and flattery in order to allow access, but Kale's human awkwardness made such formalities nearly impossible. Your whiskers are nicely whiskered," he guessed, stepping gingerly forward. The cat's enormous holographic eyes blinked in surprise, then a low purr reverberated through the chamber. Kale stumbled further, slipping on a floating orb of light, and quipped, "I think I'm overqualified for this compliment business." Somehow, despite, or because of his human literalness and humor, the cat's algorithm accepted him. The gem floated toward him with a twinkle, almost as if the universe itself chuckled at his awkward success. Aricel could hardly contain her laughter, ears flicking like wings. Her people often relied on perfection, poise, and protocol, yet here was a human turning potential disaster into charm and ingenuity. She found herself leaning closer to her observation pod, watching as Kale tripped, fell, and improvised with such creativity that even the most absurd obstacles bent to his favor. When he stumbled into a gravity field that sent him spinning upside down, he waved cheerfully at a hovering audience of artificial spectators, saying, "Do I look dignified yet?" His resilience and humor chipped away at the rigid formalities of her world, revealing something she hadn't expected, a genuine spirit, unafraid to laugh at itself. The labyrinth ended with a challenge that required truthfulness in the face of intimidation. Kale had to speak with the central consciousness of Lithara, an immense AI intelligence designed to read minds and sense hidden motives. Many had tried and failed, faltering under the weight of flattery or attempting deception. Kale approached, palms sweating, and said plainly, "I don't know if I deserve to pass, but I'll try my best." The AI hesitated, processing the human honesty. "Most beings exaggerate courage," it intoned, voice booming. "You speak without guile." Kale shrugged again, muttering, "Guess honesty's my thing." The AI, seemingly amused, or at least intrigued, accepted him, opening the final portal to the next stage. Aricel descended from her pod to greet him, ears flicking with amusement and curiosity. "Few possess courage, but fewer possess honesty," she said, violet eyes sparkling. "You navigate my world as if it were a comedy and a puzzle at once, and somehow you succeed." Kale, still streaked with neon paint and dust, grinned. "Well, I like to keep things interesting. Besides, laughter helps with labyrinth anxiety." She tilted her head, impressed by his irreverence and resilience. As the day waned, Kale rested in the palace garden, observing gravity-defying flowers that bloomed midair and trees that sang in harmonic resonance. Aricel joined him, offering a small nod of approval. "Tomorrow, the sky whale awaits," she said, a playful glint in her eyes. Kale looked up at the floating islands where the beasts awaited, and for the first time, a genuine spark of anticipation replaced his usual humor. "I hope it enjoys sarcasm," he said, eyes narrowing at the enormous creature perched atop a levitating rock. The trials had already changed him, yet he hardly noticed. Laughter, absurdity, and unexpected ingenuity had become as crucial as bravery. Aricel's presence, her amused observation, her long ears flicking in rhythm to the universe's humor, made the impossible seem approachable. The bond between human and princess, built through levity and ingenuity, had begun to take root. The adventure was far from over, but for the first time, Kale felt like the labyrinth of Lithara, its chaos, whimsy, and challenge, was something he could navigate, one awkward, clever step at a time. Kale stood at the edge of the floating platform, staring at the massive skywheel that drifted lazily above the glittering islands of Lithara. Its enormous body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, veins of light shifting like liquid stars beneath translucent skin. The creature regarded him with a curious intelligence, sending gentle waves through the air that made Kale wobble on the edge of the platform. He swallowed, muttering, "Well, it seems polite for a creature that could probably eat me in one bite." Aricel descended beside him, ears flicking with amusement, the movement betraying a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. You'll need balance, courage, and a touch of improvisation, she said. Kale gave a mock salute, slipping slightly and regaining footing with a grin. Improvisation is my middle name, he said. The moment he climbed aboard the whale's broad back, the platform beneath them disintegrated, leaving him suspended in a kaleidoscope of floating islands, twisting currents, and strange, glimmering aerial flora. The skywell rose with a lazy stretch, a gentle roar reverberating in Kale's chest. Gravity shifted unpredictably, forcing him to cling with all his strength while trying not to topple into the swirling void below. This is definitely not like riding a horse, he muttered, one hand gripping a bioluminescent fin, the other holding Aricel's ancestral insignia, which glowed softly. The Skywell's intelligence seemed to respond to Kale's anxiety with a series of playful undulations, making the ride more chaotic than anticipated. Every stumble, every desperate clutch of the shifting terrain, became a comic display of human persistence and ingenuity. Aricel floated above on a levitating pod, watching with an expression of fascination that bordered on disbelief. "You adapt better than I expected," she called down, ears flicking rapidly. Even the palace's best could not have endured this, or survived it with humor intact. Kale shouted back, "Humor keeps the blood flowing. Well, that and sheer panic." He laughed as he dodged a sudden jet of wind, spinning him upside down for a brief moment. The whale twirled with a mischievous rhythm, and Kale, despite the danger, found himself laughing, exhilarated by the absurdity of surviving through chaos rather than perfect control. Midway through the trial, the real challenge emerged. A sudden storm of plasma storms, twisting columns of glowing energy that threatened to fling him from the whale's back. Kale gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Instead of panicking, he began to read the patterns of the storm, adjusting his grip, using the whale's natural sways to his advantage. Each step required precision, instinct, and the clever improvisation he had honed throughout the labyrinth and trials with the holographic cat. When a bolt of plasma sent him spinning, he let out a whoop, somehow managing to grab onto a trailing filament of energy that arched him safely back onto the whale's fin. "Okay," he gasped, laughing breathlessly, "maybe I am overqualified for improv." From above, Aricel tilted her head, fascinated. The trials she designed had tested every facet of character: courage, intellect, humor, adaptability. Kale had passed each in his own unorthodox human way. She realized, with a softening of her usual regal composure, that she no longer viewed him as a mere suitor, but as a partner in navigating a universe that demanded creativity, resilience, and joy. As he maneuvered the whale with a combination of determination and improvisation, she felt a growing admiration, and something deeper, bubbling beneath her amusement. Finally, the whale landed lightly on a floating plateau, the insignia intact. Kale tumbled off, sprawled in a heap, neon streaks of energy from the plasma storm still clinging to his armor. He grinned at Aricel, chest heaving. Survived, barely but alive. Aricel descended, landing lightly beside him, ears flicking in rhythm with her amusement. She studied him for a moment, violet eyes glowing. "You have not only endured, but you have grown. You have discovered strength in humor, in persistence, in honesty, and in adaptability. You are no longer merely a human warrior. You are remarkable." Kale looked at her, blinking, the adrenaline and relief mingling with something unspoken. I think I've learned that the universe is less terrifying when you laugh at it," he said, cheeks flushed. "And that maybe the impossible isn't as impossible as it seems." Aricel smiled, extending her hand. Their fingers brushed, and the electric pulse between them was neither threat nor hazard, but connection. A bond forged not through triumph alone, but shared trials and laughter, fear and courage intertwined. The palace erupted in celebration, levitating lanterns spinning in radiant arcs, the floating islands illuminated by pulses of color from the skywell's bioluminescence. Courtiers and visitors, once skeptical of the human, now cheered. Even the holographic cat appeared, bowing in acknowledgement of Kale's ingenuity. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting golden and violet streaks across the city. Aricel and Kale stood together, laughter mingling with the soft hum of the palace machinery and the whisper of alien winds. In that moment, Kale felt a change within himself. Courage no longer meant fearlessness but persistence. Wisdom no longer meant perfection but adaptability, and strength no longer meant domination but connection. He looked at Aricel, her long ears flicking as she smiled, and realized that the journey had altered them both. Differences that once seemed insurmountable had become bridges. Worlds that had appeared incompatible were now harmonized through shared humor, ingenuity, and heart. Aricel finally spoke, voice warm and resonant, carrying the weight of the trials and the joy of discovery. You are the one brave enough and clever enough and foolish enough to step forward. You have passed every trial with humor, courage, and honesty. Will you stay, not as a visitor but as something more? Kale's grin softened into something sincere. I'll stay,